in peace now, we would see him come in. We would see, and we get to see all manner of what happens in this community. Now, how does this lead to Tel Aviv University and our connection? Only through the two people who introduced us. Particular Nathan, who shares a booth, who owns a booth at the restaurant. And I'll tell you a story about that in a moment, Nathan. And Stephen. Stephen came knocking on our door the other day or a month or two ago, and he said he'd like to do an event for TAU and he wanted us to participate. And our general policy is we're open to everybody. We are ecumenical. We don't favor Baycrest, the UJA, Herzog Hospital, the TAU, or even the competition Ben Gurion U. We don't favor anybody. But Stephen is not to be denied. And so here we are celebrating together Tel Aviv University. Any further questions about the history, please refer to our book. It's online. It has all the little details. Some we made up, some are true. And I would just pass it on now just to say so much of what we do is what you feel comfortable with, because we are known as the restaurant that feels like home. So we encourage our customers to make yourselves feel at home here. Pass it on to.
Well, I'll pick up on what you were saying about family, because I also want to talk about our connection to Tel Aviv University. And the first time, I mean, I had been to Tel Aviv University, but really I had been to Beit HaTfutzot on the campus of Tel Aviv University. And I'm sure many of you have been to that museum that chronicles 4,000 years of Jewish history. So really, it wasn't until a family friend was studying at Tel Aviv University that we got to know Tel Aviv University at the corner of Einstein and Chaim Lebanon. We picked up our family friend, and as Philip was saying, family and hospitality are important. Somebody is a young student. If you have an opportunity to pick them up and take them for a good meal somewhere off of the campus, you do that. So we drove up, we picked up our family friend. It reminded me of when I was in Israel in 1970, and my parents would write me an aerogram to say, oh, the Keystones are going to be in Haifa, you know, for 3 days. Make sure you get in because they're bringing something for you. So here we picked up our family friend. We went up for a wonderful lunch to a beautiful outdoor Cafe Tapuz owned by a family that I had met when I was on a Danube River trip in Budapest. So it comes full circle. It's all about family. And that was our first experience getting to know Tel Aviv University in the early 2000s.
I was fortunate enough to, I spent a year with my brother Jacob at Tel Aviv University, and it was one of the best years in school ever. It started when I was in Halifax, and I think it was Orna who came for a campus visit. And she looked at me, she says, you, come here. And she calls me over, she says, you need to go study in Israel for a year. I said, you know what, I've been thinking about it. So I said, let me give it a shot. And I looked into it a little bit and it sounded pretty easy. And it just so happened that TAU was located right next door to our family restaurant. So it made it very easy. And I'm gonna share with you right now a very quick a picture of what I looked like back then. So I think we can pull it up here. Here's a picture of me on campus with the bicycle that I had at the time. And I love studying political science there. Here's a picture of Ruthie and myself back in Tel Aviv. And I was there with my brother Jacob, who you can see here. And I have to say that going to this university was very important. Number one, because it taught me the language of Hebrew going there. After all of my Jewish education, it wasn't until I really got to Israel that that was solidified. Number two, it allowed me to work in a kitchen in Israel, which was a great way to learn how not to operate a restaurant. And number three, it actually exposed my brother to the Israeli way of life. And I distinctly remember towards the end of our time in Israel, I said to him, are you going to be going back to school in Canada and applying to university? He goes, no, I'm going to stay here and I'm going to stay here. I'm like, okay, well, what are you going to do with your time when you stay here? He goes, well, I'm going to join the army. I said, that's very noble. You're going to do like a volunteer program, maybe 6 months, a year. He goes, no, I'm going to join the Navy. I said, Jake, you can barely swim. What are you talking about? He goes, there's a unit I want to get into. And he ended up getting into it. And about 22 years later, he's still there with a motorcycle and an Israeli girlfriend and very much ingrained in Israeli society, working at a high-tech startup. So to say that TAU has played a pivotal role in our life, I think would be a bit of an understatement. And we're just really fortunate to have this connection with the university. So with that being said, we'd like to progress now into a little bit of our history. And we spoke with Stephen about the things that we kind of want to talk about, and we have some great little historical anecdotes, and we're open for questions. So at the end, if you're able to, please let us know, and you can write questions in the question box, and we'd be happy to answer them. So.
Want to do a quick story about
Tale, I have a quick tale about my connection to TAU, but I'm going to reveal secret number one about United Bakers. Perhaps, we're very much calendar oriented. We give out a placemat for the kids with calendars, and you don't miss your water till the well runs dry. We had a beautiful collection on our wall of all the colored calendars. We took it down when COVID started in our sanitation, thinking, oh, well, we'll replenish it. And almost a year later, we haven't had any kids in here to draw calendars. So as soon as you come back, be prepared to give us those beautiful calendars. In the meantime, every year around Rosh Hashanah, you might see us with brown paper bags. And you wonder why Ruthie will go up to the table and say, no, I can only give you one. Can I have the bag? The reason is inside of it is our famous annual Jewish calendar, United Bakers Dairy Restaurant calendar. Not the only thing that's famous about it is that you want to get one because people, especially people who are paper oriented and not iPhone oriented, like to have these calendars. So we always used to order, a certain quantity, and they would disappear. People would say, well, I need one for my daughter who's going to university, and I need one for my grandmother, and this and that. You can only give one per customer. So please, when she walks around Rosh Hashanah with a brown paper bag, now you know what they are, one per customer. My connection to TAU also came through a calendar. Somebody gave me a beautiful calendar of birds from Israel. And I don't know how, but we found out that the professor that had shot the pictures was Professor Yossi Leshem. So we asked Stephen if he could arrange for us to go meet Yossi Leshem. Ruthie and I walked into his office at TAU, and we asked for Professor Yossi Leshem, and we met the mad professor. His office, I could not run a kitchen the way he runs his office, with stacks and stacks and stacks of paper. And he was delighted to see us, and he proceeded to, when we asked him a question, he knew exactly where to look to find the answer, even though it was a mess in his kitchen. And he, of course, took us on a trip. And being at TAU, having any connection with it was, for me, an elevating experience for Ruthie and me both. And she'll tell you how it elevated us.
Well, I think I'm going to pivot a little bit, and I'm going to actually talk about the fact that Philip and I really, our first career choice was not to go into the restaurant business. But we decided, you know what? We had both started working with our dad, and the restaurant was closed on weekends. And we thought, you know what? Let's try and open it on Sunday mornings and see how it goes. And so I was a regular Blue or Y person, was there, as are many of you on the call. And we thought to ourselves, you know what? If we start opening on Sunday morning for brunch, we might attract that young crowd or all age crowd from the Blue or Y after they've finished their workout, their run, their swim, whatever they do, to come down for brunch at United Bakers. And don't forget, Spadina, Kensington, in the late 70s, early 80s, it was hip to come down to Spadina and to come to Kensington Market. And you went to Chalky's and you bought your gutkas and whatever it was you bought, but it was a great place to be. And we decided, you know what, we can work well together. So that began our profession together. But we wanted to share a few little stories.
Our father did not want us to open Sundays. He said, "What? Nobody's downtown on Sundays." The second Sunday, we had a line up out the door, including strollers. So he came around very quickly.
Yeah. Anyhow, we wanted to share a few little anecdotal stories. And one that I'd like to share with you is a story about our father's hospitality. First of all, he was the consummate host, and he made everybody that walked into his restaurant feel comfortable. His name was Herman, but people referred to him as Hi and Jaime affectionately. And one day in the early evening, a longtime lawyer customer walked in with one of his partners, a criminal lawyer. Probably you would all know the name. It was Austin Cooper, and Austin was working on a very difficult case at the time.
That's not Austin, but this is Herman.
Yeah. Austin was working on a very difficult case at the time. He might have even been working on the case with Keith Richards, where he was trying to get him off of a heroin charge. But in any case, it was a difficult case. And he said to his lawyer friend, I would like to go out for dinner with you, but I really need a drink. So his friend Herbie said to him, great, come on, I'll take you out for dinner. And they drive over to Spadina Avenue, and Herbie parks his car in front of United Bakers. And Austin says to him, Herbie, I said I needed a drink. And Herbie said, no problem, you're gonna get a drink. And they walked into the restaurant, and Herbie and Austin walked up to the front counter, and Herbie said to Austin and to my dad, hi, this is Austin Cooper. My father said, pleasure to meet you. Herbie said, hi, can you pour us a drink? And my father reached underneath his cabinet and he pulled out what he called his bottle of apple juice, but it was more than apple juice. And he took out 3 shot glasses and he poured 3 drinks. And the guys were happy. They had their drink, they sat down, they had their pea soup, they had their blintzes, their lepkas, their kasha. It was like a Gun Eden. They ate to their heart's content. And when they came to the cash register to pay, my father tallied up what they had eaten, and Austin said to him, and how much do I owe you for the drink? And my father said, what drink? Which takes Nathan to round out the story.
So be it celebrating a simcha or any life cycle event, there's a black door in the basement. When we reopen for dining room service, please come knock on that door and we'll share some apple juice with you. This stays within this call.
Well, let's just say, and this is certainly quite the way to start off our brunch here, and that's only, I believe, the first of many stories that we're going to end up hearing that perhaps were not known to many people, such as that drink, and I know that within the card that was sent out, you guys touched a little bit upon some of those stories. But I guess really the question is, what's and maybe prior to us getting into some of those stories, what's it like now working? This is 4th generation, as you talked about. How does it balance out Nathan, now you being there full time and working with your father, working with your aunt? What's that relationship like between the 3 of you?
Well, we're still sitting together, so it's humbling. It's a little bit of pressure, and it's empowering. Being able to have this rich lineage that we rely on in order to adapt in the present time is so important, and I'm so grateful for that. We talk about pivot, and forgive me if you've already heard this, but in order to actually pivot, one foot moves, but the other foot stays the same. The other foot has to stay solid. And I'm grateful to have such a strong, solid background here that allowed us to pivot. Our culture allowed us to adapt very quickly, literally overnight, multiple times. I joke that, within the last year, I feel like we've opened up 3 new restaurants, all in the same location. So every time there's been a new announcement from the Ministry of Health or from the province, we've had to adapt to it. So
Can you are we on, or is the restaurant on?
that's the old dining room.
I know, but are people looking at that or at us?
Stephen,
No, they're looking at both of them.
Stephen,
Yeah.
I think people are looking at the interior of the restaurant on Spadina, and I just have to share a quick story because that is exactly the picture that this person was caught in. One evening after the restaurant had closed, there was nobody around. The restaurant looked like that, pristine. The booths and the chairs were all pushed in on one side. The counter with the stools was on the other side. And a would-be robber decided that he's going to break into United Bakers. And, he didn't know the expression, take the money and run, because he went in, he took himself a little bit of money. There wasn't very much in the till, but he decided, you know what? I have to sit down and I'm going to make myself a sandwich, and I'm going to put out a few scoops of ice cream into a bowl, and I'm going to sit at one of those little stools and have myself a little meal. And, you know, downtown on Spadina, there were people walking by the front of the restaurant, and usually our cat Goofus was in the front window, but Goofus wasn't there. He wasn't guarding the restaurant. There was no security at that time. So this would-be robber was apprehended by a customer who was walking by and made sure that he brought an undercover policeman along with him. And the guy, you know, decided, okay, at least he didn't leave hungry, but he was satiated.
29 bakers, even the thieves don't leave hungry. Yeah.
What Ruthie's talking about is even a thief makes himself feel at home. Now, I would like to say at the same view of the restaurant, we have customers today in Lawrence Plaza, many of them women, men, children, families, who come in on a regular, once a week, once every 2 days, sometimes every single day basis. Now, we had a particular lawyer who occupied, you can't see the table, it's at the very back next to the kitchen doors. He was, to me, was an elderly gentleman. He was probably 60 years old at the time. And he sat with Rabbi Nachman Shemin. He was a lawyer. Rabbi Shemin was a downtown, a very well-respected man. And the two of them, every day, that was their table at lunch. One day, chas v'shalom, I don't know how it happened, at 11:30, two young women, who knows where they came from, because women didn't come that often downtown, occupied the table. And they were having their coffee, and I think they were having blintzes, if I remember correctly, which takes some time to eat. And they were deep in conversation. Well, our lawyer, Mr. Zed, Mr. LZ, well-known, famous, I don't know if he really was a lawyer, but he claimed to be a lawyer. It was a little man with a very big ego. And he walked to the back of the restaurant, and his table was occupied. I must interrupt him before I finish the story by saying there's another man I know named Nathan D, who occupies a table every single morning at the back of Lawrence Plaza restaurant. And this Nathan D, who happens to be wearing a pink shirt, but I won't tell you who he is today, asked me if he could buy the table. And I said, no. So he said, okay, well, maybe I can put a plaque on the table so that they know it's mine. I said, no. But nonetheless, he knows that if he doesn't get here at a certain time, somebody else might be sitting in his table. Now, here's how you solve it, Nathan, if you're listening. This lawyer, LZ, Mr. LZ, walked up to the table and silently stood, literally like a waiter might, right over these two young women, glaring at them. And they looked up at him, and he didn't say a word. And they got the message very quickly, and they picked up and they left because the table belonged to him. When he passed away, his son purchased the table from us when we closed the restaurant in '86. No, Nathan, we're not closing. No, you can't purchase the table yet. But if somebody's there and you want to try and remove him with a glare, go for it.
And I'll quickly just add, when Philip said there weren't many women downtown, when Philip first came to Lawrence Plaza and opened up the restaurant here, and I remained on Spadina, it was 1984, and Philip phoned me and he said, I'm looking around the rrestaurant here, and I think I can count on the fingers of my right hand the number of men I see in the restaurant. And I looked down around Spadina and I said, well, I can count on the fingers of my right hand the number of women that are here on Spadina. But it always changed, because when we were down there and we attracted that younger men and women and families, it was everybody.
So some of the cultural traditions or funny cultural quirks that we've experienced on Spadina, I have the joy of inheriting up here. And one of those interesting quirks is the sleuth work that's required to operate a restaurant. And it's not uncommon for someone to forget a Visa card or an AirPod or whatever, sunglasses, prescription medication, you name it, we've seen it. Our Lost and Found's probably got some pretty funny things in it, but Ruthie is like super sleuth #1. And if somebody forgets something in the restaurant, she has this uncanny ability to go back through our, catering orders, our gefilte fish orders, and now with the help of Facebook, we can, in 311, we can really triangulate people. And I think it's a good time to talk about the cholent and
a great story actually about that, because on one winter's day, two women, I'm sure more than two women, but on this particular one winter day, two women came in wearing a navy jacket, and they hung them up at the front of the restaurant. And when one of the women left, she took the wrong navy jacket. And, you know, we didn't have cameras downtown, but we did have a camera at the front door here at Lawrence Plaza. And as it happened, the other person went up to look for her coat. Her coat actually was a navy jacket that had a pin on the collar, and it wasn't there. But there was another navy jacket that was left behind that had a little bit of a tearing on the inside lining. Her coat was beautiful. It was a new, beautiful jacket with a pin. Anyhow, I said, you know what? Her daughter said to her mom, we're going to go home. You don't need to take this coat. They're going to find your coat. I'm going to put you in the car right now. We'll take you right home and we'll resolve this problem.
She was not happy.
Super Sleuth Ruthie went downstairs to our camera, and I watched it for about 4 hours, watching every person that walked in and out of the door wearing a navy jacket. And fortunately, we know our customers. So I started making phone calls, and, you know, I made 3 or 4 phone calls to people. You know, I'm just wondering if by chance you took the wrong jacket. No, I didn't. Anyhow, I finally got one number late in the day, and a gentleman answered the phone, and I said, is your wife there, please? He said, no, she's not. He was calling. I said, it's Ruthie Ledowsky from United Bakers. She was here for lunch today, and I'm wondering if perhaps she went home with the wrong jacket. He said, I wouldn't put anything past my wife. I said, okay, when she gets home, could you please have her call me? Just at that moment, our dear friend from downtown, Saul, who had his business on Adelaide, stopped at United Bakers to pick up his blintzes, which he always liked to take home before he went home for the day. And he said to me, Rachel, come sit down with me. He said, I want to share a story with you. When we were kids in the shtetl, my mom used to give us a pot to take to the baker on Friday afternoon, our pot of cholent. Like all of the members of our community, everybody took their cholent to the baker. They put it into his oven at night on Friday night.
Thursday night.
Friday night. And on Saturday morning, as we're coming home from shul, all of the pots were on the floor, outside of the oven on the floor. And everybody would stop at the baker and pick up what they thought was their pot. And sometimes a rich person would end up with a poor person's pot, and sometimes a poor person would end up with a rich person's pot. And I said to him, Saul, you would not believe what I've been doing all day today. I'm trying to find the woman that went away with the beautiful jacket and left the shmeta in its place. P.S. It was that woman, and I was able to drive up to her place and bring it down and return the jacket to its rightful owner.
But there is still a blue dress that we're trying to find. Do you want to talk about that?
I don't know the blue dress.
The blue dress that's...
yes,
here.
The blue dress.
Yes, the blue dress.
So many years ago, a young boy,
It's up on screen.
I think it's a boy or a girl, Jesse, drew something for United Bakers. And at the bottom, he said, I want to make this dress someday. So if Jesse is watching, or if you know a Jesse who has become a fashion designer, please have Jesse get in touch with us. We want to thank Jesse very much for adding to our artwork and for making United Bakers a place of creativity for him.
And speaking of artwork, and I have to give a shout out to my mother, Karen, who illustrates all of the calendars that we print monthly for the kids.
35 years of it.
And if you want a book made, I wonder if we should do like a yearly calendar, a book of that. So if you're into that, shoot us a private message if you're interested. But it was one of the last days last year before we closed down. But Hart Pomerantz, who's an illustrator, came in, and on the back of one of our menus, he did this with a single crayon. I just thought it really captured who we are so nicely, you know, with the waitress yelling at him, "Finish your soup." And you know, it's these sort of small things as a restaurant operator that I take a lot of joy in. These small things that people, these personal connections that people have with our space and with our culture. And it's really a joy when we see the artwork from the kids that gets posted in the front, or when we have even older patrons like Hart make these illustrations for us. And also another really cool thing that we happen to see every once in a while is we get to see the occasional proposal, and we also get to see some wedding photos. And I don't want to share the name of who this was, but this is one of the most beautiful pictures that I think we've ever had taken in our business. This was probably about 7 years ago. You can see the old fridges in the bakery, the old cash registers, but this was a couple, I think it was right after their wedding or right before their wedding, but it was one of the most beautiful photos that we've received. And I think I just wanted to share it with everyone today, because this is one of the joyful things that we really take pride in being able to appreciate and share with our entire team. So this
speaks very much to the one subject that we haven't really brought up, and that's our staff. Our staff are one of the biggest reasons, the continuity of our staff are one of the biggest reasons why people feel comfortable, feel at home here. Little kids come in and they used to be able to get to hug a waitress, or they would see Jaya, our busman, our general floor manager, or they would see any of the people who are long-term workers, and they would just feel at home. We would make them feel at home. The same thing happened, of course, down in Spadina. And the same thing happened, we hope will continue to happen going forward, because we really miss you. But I have to say that there have been some staff, because it is hard work and often attracts people who are not employed elsewhere. There are some staff who have peculiar habits. We did have a dishwasher downtown who worked, he was from Eastern Europe, and he had survived the war, and he worked very, very hard by himself, Steve. And in the evenings, sometimes he would, it wasn't an electric dishwasher, everything was washed by hand. Sometimes he would appear as he came to get the bus pans just wearing an undershirt. He would, one time he appeared wearing no shirt. And the third time when he appeared just wearing his undershorts, I had to go back to see what was going on. He was doing his laundry, and he was washing the dishes. At the same time, he would be washing his clothing, and he had his shirt and his pants hanging up in the dishwashing area, which was a very small room in our downtown. But he was an excellent employee. And there were actually some people who said, they were happy to see him as well, dressed, undressed,
Actually, apropos to that, it's probably one of the employees that I had brought to Spadina, Steve, because sometimes I'd be driving down Spadina and my dad would say to me, I want you to stop at the Scott Mission and pick up somebody to come and wash the dishes for us, because the dishwasher didn't come in today. I mean, I would stop at the Scott Mission, say to somebody, if you want a day of work, maybe even longer than a day of work, come on, you'll get in my car, you'll have a lunch, you'll have a dinner, and you'll earn some money. And sure enough, it could have been Steve.
But in addition to our daytime shift, we also had a single overnight employee that you had the joy of knowing, a four-legged employee.
Yeah, we, back, I'm sure we're spending a lot of time in Spadina, but I'm sure a lot of the people on the call have some memory of Spadina. Back in the day, having a cat was part of having a business downtown. They were just, every family has a pet. I'm sure everybody who's watching this has a dog, and some probably have cats. We've always had cats. So downtown we had a big red tabby. She was beautiful. Goofy, her actual name was Goofus McBoofalus. That was the registered name. I wrote it down somewhere, I don't know where. And Goofy lived with me. I lived in the apartment upstairs from the restaurant, so that I didn't have a long commute. I could actually wake up at 5:45 in the morning and walk downstairs and open the place. And I used to bring Goofus down after closing hours, and she would put in her shift. And her shift involved, keeping those creatures that we didn't want at bay. Not the robber, and certainly not the table purchasers, but the other creatures that might have been wandering around. And then she would sleep in the window. However, we didn't bring many staff up from Lawrence Plaza, but when we closed Lawrence Plaza in 86, or actually it was before 86, Goofy came up to work with me one Passover up here, because it was an old building at the time. And I said, I said to her, she didn't answer me. I said, you can do a shift up here. So I brought her up here, and I left her up here overnight. And then when I opened the door the next day, she went out the back door. Now, perhaps you remember Lawrence Plaza didn't used to have buildings behind us in Covington. It used to have wide open fields. There was a school, and there was the library there before the Barbara Frum Library. And that was the last I ever saw of Goofus McRufus. If anybody knows where a large red tabby, very lovely red tabby went, please let me know. I miss her.
And I think that, really, as you've all mentioned, your staff really have become, synonymous with UB. So what do you think, first of all, I guess, who is the longest serving staff member currently non-family? And then what do you think the secret is to, to being able to keep the staff you have, and being able to really build that sense of family in the restaurant?
I'm trying to find a picture because the answer to your question is Violet. She's been working with our family longer than I've been alive. And I can tell you as a young person trying to make changes in the business, it's very interesting talking with her and understanding our history and understanding the way she thinks and sort of the critical lens she brings to our operation, the way she orders pastry, the way she proofs things, the way she organizes and double checks things. It's learn a lot from her. The longevity of our staff, I don't know if I can speak to that as well as Philip and Ruthie can, but I can tell you that really it comes down to servant leadership. That's the perspective I adopt, which is we're here to serve our staff, to identify what they need to succeed and to make sure that they have it and they feel that support. Because we can't be there to service every person that comes in the restaurant as much as we want to be there. We physically can't, and it's up to our staff to be there. So it's up to us to communicate through that service value chain, the essence of hospitality that we want them, our line level employees, to convey. And we hope that that extends throughout the entire operation. That's not only for customer facing staff, but also for people in our kitchen. And to build an inclusive and respectful workplace that starts from the front door and extends all the way to the back door and extends to social media outside the workplace and to emails and WhatsApp groups. That's really what I think is important in keeping staff engaged and motivated to provide this. And if you go to our social media, Instagram specifically, my brother was here, Adam, this morning, and he took a quick video on our social media of the operation that went into preparing today's orders. And it was just the energy was electric. So honestly, to everyone on this call and everyone who ordered packages, we thank you. We thank you for bringing us that energy this morning and giving our staff a reason to really, bring 110% to work. And they were on fire this morning. It was just amazing. It was like clockwork getting these things, getting these packages done. So we enjoyed it, and we hope you're enjoying eating this as we talk about it. So
If I could just to say to, people would come into the restaurant and they would see me walking from table to table and sharing stories. And honestly, I think like every single person would say to me, Ruthie, you have absolutely the best job. Look how many people you get to see every day. Look at how many meaningful conversations you have with people every day. Honestly, I look forward to the day that I can come back and start schmoozing, because it's one thing to, get an email from somebody of them sharing a story about how much they miss coming to United Bakers and seeing everybody. But it's another thing to have people sitting here and having face-to-face connections. And that's what we're missing more than anything today.
And so we have a few questions that have come in. The daughter of Matthew Getzler is asking, what's the favorite part of your job?
May I answer that?
Go right ahead.
One of the favorite parts is talking to your father. He is a gentleman. He's involved with the UJA, probably with Tel Aviv University. And my favorite part is Erev Pesach. We've worked so hard. The whole staff has been focused. What we did this morning times 10, and Erev Pesach comes, we're closed. So at 8 o'clock at night on the day before Erev Pesach, we close the door. And I sit here in silence as the staff unload and leave. And I leave by 11, 11:30 now. I have the future leaves a little bit later than I go home. And I look back on all that we've done together, and I go, wow, the whole community that we know that we've had, they've all come through our doors. Not all of them, but our community come through our doors and hopefully gone home satisfied. There's nothing more fulfilling than being part of the community. That's my favorite. Part of the
And
job.
my favorite part of the job is the reminiscing. And honestly, I do it every single solitary day. And I know on the phone, on this call, the Grafstein girls that would come into Spadina, and my dad would, you know, welcome them with open arms. And they carried on coming here for years and years and years and continue to come here as a family. You know, we missed that. We miss sharing those wonderful memories that we all have.
My favorite part is when I see 3 or 4 or sometimes even 5 generations at a single table. That's special. And to think that this family could have chosen any restaurant in the city, and they decided to come and share their time together or celebrate their milestone together at our restaurant with us and our family. That's the most meaningful. And I love schmoozing with tables like that. You get a diversity of opinions and plethora of ideas and memories, and everyone wants to tell you something, and it just, they're the most fun people to see. You shep nachas when you say that.
Now, I'm going to merge a couple of other questions that we've had. One of which, so you've talked about Spadina, you've talked about Lawrence Plaza. One question that I got was, is it true that there was once a third location, and are there plans for another location?
Let me answer the first half and then I'll stay silent. There was another location on Steeles from June 89 to June 94, 48 months. At the time, I had been 5 years up here. Ruthie had come up here with me. I had fabulous staff, many of whom lived in Thornhill, and there came an opportunity to open a restaurant. We opened it in June of 1989, excuse me. And we were expecting all kinds of buildings to be constructed beside it. And then the real estate crash of 1989 happened and nothing got built. And so we were sort of standing in a plaza that wasn't anywhere. And it became more and more difficult to operate. So after 48 months, we closed the door and I came back here and focused our services on here. And I don't regret for a minute that I didn't split myself, because with driving back and forth, again, we are a family owned and family operated. And if I started the day here, by 9 o'clock, I was up at Steeles and I would be speaking to Ruthie on the phone and back and forth, and I'd come back here. It wasn't the way I would hope my career to unfold. Now, future,
we actually are going to be opening a second location. It's just next door on the second floor. It's called CFTAU. If you have any issues or complaints, give them a call, knock on their door. But if you want to buy stuff,
here's the key.
But we have so much going on and are grateful for all that we have going on with one location at the moment. We don't have any immediate plans for expansion, but the ultimate goal of mine is to expand and extend my great-grandparents' hospitality from coast to coast. And I do hope that in the next 10 to 15 years, we can start to realize that dream in small steps, meaningful steps. And we want to make sure that we don't compromise the stability and the continuity that we've worked so hard to establish with our current service setup. So that's something we never want to lose. We never want to change. So yeah, we're staying where we are right now.
Another question that we're getting is about the menu. So the menu, I will ignore the price change. I will just stick with the content of the menu of what it was for a long time. It was updated, tweaks, adding some things. And then there was, somebody mentioned a secret menu. And so I don't know whether it's perhaps a little bit like going to some of the burger places, where you walk in and there's the menu and then there's the other menu. But so as you look ahead and you've sampled with some things, be it as exotic as avocado or whatever for the case is, when you're looking at revamping the menu, what are the things that you're looking at?
I'm gonna let you talk about that in a second, but I'm just laughing to myself because people would come in and see my dad sitting and having his farmer salad with a scoop of salmon on top of it. His Michael, he had his Michael. So people would come in and say, I want Jaime's Michael, revamping the menu.
So we always talk like, you go online to Instagram, you see all these fancy permutations of traditional classics, and there's certain other restaurants in the city where you can go get a $20 bowl of matzo ball soup or, $30 French toast. We don't want to be that. That's not who we are. And Ruthie always jokes, you're never going to find lavender in our blintzes. They are the same traditional Polish recipe that we've been making for forever. I mean, if you want to talk nitty gritty, like I'm really into menu engineering, and there's an entire science behind how you lay out a menu. If it's a single fold menu, if it's a one sheet or a two-fold, three-fold menu, where the eye goes, there's research into this, and there's heat maps where you can see that the eye traces from the middle to the left to the bottom, up to the lower middle, then to the bottom and the top right. And there's all these ways to lay it out, where to put lines, where to put boxes. And we've played around a little bit with this, but right now we are getting a lot of demand for gluten-free items, and we're hoping that in the next couple of months we can incorporate more gluten-free items. The last gluten-free item that we incorporated is the absolutely delicious Shuk Quinoa Salad. It's vegan as well. It's perfectly cooked quinoa with kale, shredded kale, with some red cabbage, some cherry tomatoes, broccoli, red peppers. It's served with a side of hummus and our own house-made dressing for it. It's packed full of protein. It's super clean, very tasty, and it's available for takeout and delivery. So I'm going to push that a little bit. But something else that we've had to consider, and this is more from an operations standpoint, is most of our menu is configured for dine-in. One of our principles has always been cornucopia. We want you to have an entire full meal, even if you're ordering just one dish, which is why if you order a gefilte fish dinner, you'll get bagel and bread on the side or soup and salad. But we've realized that that sort of cornucopia, we need to provide that, but we need to do it in a way that works for off-premise dining, specifically in COVID. And we're finding that even though we have bundled meals, when somebody calls for the macaroni dinner, they sometimes don't want the salad or the soup on the side or the bagel. They just want the macaroni. And that's something that we've had to account for as we move through COVID. So don't expect any radical changes to the menu. All of your traditional favorites and our classics are still going to stay there. And we hope that as we are able to safely reopen dining, we can bring back even more of those classics, like our filet of herring and our shakshuka, some of the dishes that don't travel very well, but we want to make sure that we can still offer. So that's kind of the short term on the menu.
And if somebody has a really hard day at work now, they don't want a serious drink. They want a bowl of pea soup when they come home. That's their comfort.
And you've talked, obviously, Stacey, a lot about the restaurant's origins, but how did the Ledowskis get started in the restaurant business to begin with? When they at whatever point it was, what were they doing beforehand that led them to opening a restaurant here?
Very briefly, if you look on our website and look at the first couple of, in the beginning, the first 4 paragraphs, it tells that our grandfather and grandmother, our grandfather came over here as an 18-year-old man in 1906. And he came from Poland. Poland was traditionally the breadbasket of Eastern Europe. They were bakers. He had baking skills. And in 1912, when he first opened the restaurant, he was baking. And his wife, Sarah Eichler, whom he met here, but she was from his town, he was baking and she was making food, prepared foods. He brought his brother Laser over from Poland in 1920 something, I'm not sure what. And they became the United Bakers. Or they was United Bakers before that, but he came from a family that was baking. Restaurant, my father, when he came back from serving overseas in the Second World War, was not a baker. And his father, Aaron, was about to retire. So my father had the downtown location and he didn't continue to do much baking. When Ruthie and I came in the late 70s, the whole back of the kitchen was an empty oven. We removed it. What does my son want to do?
We'd like to focus a bit more on baking.
The wheel comes full circle.
Well, that was the next question, of course, and everybody who got the food kits got the surprise Humentaschen for Purim, which is coming up, and the famous sprinkle cookies, which brings up the question then of how much baking is still going on at United Bakers today.
I'd say a fair amount of baking still goes on here. Most of our product that we do bake, like our muffins and some of our pastries, we do make here. But other products, for the consistency and the ease of their availability, we purchase through 2 of our close suppliers. both of which we've had probably 20, if not 30 years relationships with. So we go quite a far ways back with them. But it's a tricky thing, and this is something we debate internally because we'll be transparent. The margins on baked goods are not stellar, but it also is very much part of who we are. And also when it comes to baking, bakers can be, particular people, so to speak. It takes a certain type of person. And to make sure that you have someone coming in at 5, 6 in the morning, it's challenging enough to make sure someone's coming in 5, 6 in the morning to start the soups and other spreads that we have going every day. But to add on baking and make sure you have the space for that is a challenge as well. So it's something that we'd like to increase what we do. We make as much of it in-house as we do, and everything you get in our bakery is fresh that day.
And when it came to rye breads, there was nothing like the Silverstein rye bread. And every morning on Spadina, we get our deliveries of Silverstein's ryes. And every day at lunch, the Silverstein brothers would be in holding court at United Bakers.
And I gotta say,
lunch.
every once in a while, we find a Silverstein's baking tray floating around in circulation. And it's nice to see the red Silverstein. So I don't know if any of the Silverstein's relatives are on this call, but the legacy of your family business is still living on in Toronto.
Another question that we got is, you mentioned Adam being in the store, being in the restaurant this morning, and Jacob is in Israel. So unless there's a plan to open an Israeli location, which could be a whole other adventure, but is Adam going to be getting involved with the business?
I mean,
He already is. He's currently involved with the business in doing some of our social media. He does Instagram posts.
He was influential in getting our e-commerce platform set up. He was the one that took the charge on that and did a great job last Rosh Hashanah. And he's there for all sorts of things, and his skill set is outstanding. And he's currently doing an MBA at Schulich, so we're all very proud of him. And with the entire family, one of the joys of a family business is there's lots of room. There's always lots of stuff that has to be done. So it's up to him and Jacob to decide how they want to develop their careers. But I could use their help. So and they're very helpful. So and that's just to talk about family business for a little bit. It's not always easy. It is quite challenging because you're passionate about what it is you do. And the other generations and other stakeholders are also very passionate. And if anybody works in a family business, I think one of the best pieces of advice that I've gotten from all my studies in family business has been from Ruthie. And that's, if you do have a disagreement or some sort of a challenge, you shut the book and you move on. And it's fantastic advice because we work hard at United Bakers, but we also go to Friday night dinners pre-COVID at Ruthie's. That was our Shabbat dinner together. And we would have, whatever was going on at work. I don't like how you did the gefilte fish list. I don't like how you list that. We get to Ruthie's for dinner. It's done. It's family time. And that's, I think, something that a lot of people don't see from, looking in is the family dynamic. And it's just great advice, I think, if anybody else runs a family business or is in one, to make sure that it lasts beyond 2 generations.
And I think that certainly is wise advice for anybody dealing with their families with anything. If you're going to have a disagreement, know when it's done, close the book, and move on.
And you don't put it back up, yeah.
And never ever open it back up again. Listen, I said this. We could spend, I'm sure hours more sitting here. There's all sorts of questions or comments about cheese blintzes and avocado on toast and all sorts of other things. But really, this has been a pleasure. And on behalf of myself and our board chair, David Altschuler, Nathan Diesenhaus, who of course is Mr. UB himself there, and who I know dreams of being able to have the ability to make reservations. And that's a whole other separate area of a discussion of how some people have managed to find the workaround during the lunchtime and, showing up with grandkids.
What's he talking about? We don't know what you're talking about. Yeah.
There's all sorts of backroom chat. There's all sorts of backroom chatter. But really, your family are steadfast in their support of the Jewish community, of Israel, As you mentioned, although the majority of it, we take pride in it coming to Canadian Friends of Tel Aviv University, we don't mind it being shared amongst the wider community. And so really, for everything that it is that you do, there you go. Thank you very much. And thank you to all of you who purchased your food kits. All of the money that is raised here is going to support scholarships for our students who have been impacted by COVID. And so I thank all of you. And as Nathan said, check out UB on social media. There's all sorts of things going on. You can now find them on Uber Eats, on Ritual, I think also on DoorDash. So UB, if you're not as lucky as I am to have an office right upstairs and keys to the black door in the basement, UB can still come to you at home. So again, Ruthie, Philip, Nathan, thank you to all of you, and thank you to everybody for joining us. Continue to stay safe. Enjoy your brunch. Chag Sameach for Purim.
Chag Purim Sameach.
And we'll see you. We will see you all soon. Thanks.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.